Once again, a warm welcome back. Flight Sim and other stuff, and part 2 of the lessons on access NOs and the framework to program the X-Touch Mini. Just before we go any further, this lesson is going to be using version 1.3 of the framework. So if you haven't got that and you haven't upgraded that yet, please do so, because it's going to make your life an awful lot easier, and there's some nice improvements to it. The upgrade, really simple. Just look at the documentation. I believe it's in chapter 3, about 2.1 or thereabouts. But follow the upgrade step. You have to delete some old template files because things have improved, like I said. And once you've done that, you can join along with this lesson. So let's jump down to the Flight Sim computer and have a look. So here we are inside the simulator with the Access NOs template running and the gauge on the screen. This is not the HTML gauge, this is the standard gauge. Quick one about that before I go further. To display the gauges, you go to Access NOs, and you go to Gauges, and you select Desktop FIPS and switch it on. There are several different versions. If I go to the extra small version, you see the size hasn't changed yet. You must press the reset button. And now I've got the very small one. But for this, we're going to go back to the large one, reset the size, and we're ready to go. And like I said, the labelling on the gauge is really useful, even on a flat screen. If you've got a spare screen, as I have, and I'll show you in a little bit, that's mounted above the X-Touch Mini, and it saves me printing out the labels, as I said before. Anyway, let's get on with the labelling of the label. The labelling of the labels? The labelling of the layers. To make life a little bit easier, just before I go into it, I've got a special layer I've set up to explain what's on the screen. Each of the rotaries have their own label, and the rotaries, not only can you twist them, but you can push them, and we have a short push and a long push option on the rotaries. Really useful for Airbus flyers when you want to push to go into manage mode and pull the rotary. So we can simulate here with a short push and a long push. So the short push has 2 lines of text available to it, short 1 and short 2, and the long push is shown to the bottom left of the rotaries, and again there are 2 lines of text, and those lines are available for each and every rotary. Below the rotaries we have our first line of push buttons, and one of the reasons we've got this new gauge, this graphic representation of the X-Touch, is it's been stretched slightly to allow for 2 lines of text in here. Before version 1 you could only fit 1 line of text in there, but now there's 2. So you've got 2 lines for short presses on the button and 2 lines for long presses, and each of these texts will appear alongside each of the buttons. Likewise for the bottom row. Likewise for these 2 buttons here. There are short pushes and long push texts, and there are labels. For the slider itself, there are 2 labels, label 1 and label 2, and down the left hand side, this gauge, which has got 025.5, typo error there, 75.150, you can change that labelling as well. And that's what we're going to go through in this tutorial to start with. So let's get back to the first layer. One additional piece of text you haven't seen yet is the label for the layer, because I can have many layers on the X-Touch, and this is where the on-screen gauge is a big help to flat screen flyers, because there's no way on one of the printout templates that you stick over the buttons can you squeeze in, say, 5 or 6 different layers. So how do we edit this? Well, we'll need our text editor, and in my case Notepad++, and in Notepad++ you need to, I'll just close that because I've already done it. We'll open up the text file And let's look at the Xtouch C172 file. So starting at the very top, I'll come back to the first line of text about pre-touch enable. That's for VR flyers, and I'll come back to that at the end of this tutorial. The line below that, the slider text, that is the text that appears below the slider, and that's line 1. The line below that is line 2. I'm not actually using the slider, so I could get rid of that. And if I save it, nothing's happened. That's because Access and O's has been set up to cache the gauge. It's a lot safer for you if you do not make live changes when you're flying. So that's why it's cached. There is a developer mode you can go into, but I'm not going to discuss that in this lesson. So we'll just go to Access and O's. We will press the green light to disconnect from the simulator, and we'll press again to connect. And now that piece of text has disappeared. The line above that, which I skipped, is the label for the layer. And there are 3 lines of text there. Each line is inside single quotes. It's really important that you don't screw this up. When you're editing this text file, your text must be enclosed. Each piece of text must be enclosed inside a single quote mark. If you do not do that, things will go wrong. I will give you an example. I'm going to save this. I've removed the first quote. If I come out and go back in, on this one I've simply lost some of the format, but things could get a lot worse. So please make sure when you're editing the file you keep the quote marks. Single quotes, apostrophes. Let's go back into Access and O's. Back in, and the format's there. Good. First line of text is the rotaries. There is a line here that's not actually used. It's there as a guide for you. Below that is the Xtouch macro rotary text. This is the labels for each of the rotary buttons. Each button is labelled inside quotes, as can be seen. And the idea of the gauge is to give you an idea of the spacing. For example, if I was to change this one to left, so this is the G530 large left knob. If I label it like that, I can instantly see that it's wider than the gauge, and it's going to look a bit odd on here. Don't believe me? Save it. Access and O's. Yeah, it's things are getting a bit messy now. So try and keep it inside that gap. Left RG. So the first line is the label for the rotaries themselves. And if we work down here, down this section, each of these lines represent labels that can be applied to the rotaries. So the short click, there's the text below the button. Now we have lots of space. You could put this on 2 lines, so the push CV, I could take the CV out of that line and put it in the short click second line text. CV. If I save that, go out, go in, then you can see we've got the push CV there. This allows you to label it and make it work for your setup. So going back to my reference, you see I have the long text. Well, that will be in this line, these two lines here, long click 1, long click 2. We're not going to talk about the shifts. We'll talk about the shift options in the next lesson. Now, just before I continue, let me go back. Let me point out a couple of things. First of all, these are just labels. We are not affecting the functionality of the controller in any way. There is no script here. It does not matter. I don't have to label them. The function of the buttons are irrelevant to the label. They are just a reference. So you can have buttons that are labeled that have no function, buttons that aren't labeled but do have a function. It's just a template for labels. That's the first bit. Second bit is the spacing here is irrelevant. It's only spaced out like this to make it easier for you to read. I could take out all of these spaces as long as I have the apostrophes, the single quotes, either side of every set of text, then it'll work. And if there are 8 sets of text here, I've got to have 8 sets of apostrophes. Do not get rid of these, because the whole template is built around knowing which set of apostrophes exists and how many there are. So do not get rid of the apostrophes. If you want a blank button, just 2 apostrophes either side. So buttons 1 to 8 are the rotaries. Next line we have buttons 9 to 17. So this is button 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Skip the rotary, and this is button 17. Going down to the next layer, we have buttons 18 through to 26. Now, one of the reasons we run the bay ringer in MC mode is because it allows us to address all the LEDs, and it also, we get rid of this 2 layer. By default, the bay ringer is set with layer A and layer B. Well, we've extended that functionality. Unlimited layers. Just keep adding them. And I'm going to show you that in a second. Now we get into the code itself, the function of the buttons. And let's look at the first one. It's the rotary 1 left and rotary 1 right. This button here, if we turn it left or if we turn it right. And there is a piece of code in there. I can test this code inside Access and O's just by copying it. Go to Access and O's. I need to bring up the simulator so we can see it. Go to scripting, the script editor, and just paste the text in here. And if I click test, I need a bit of light so I can see. Let's just change. So now if I test this, each time I press the button you can see the altimeter decreasing. So this piece of code here will show you where to get these pieces of code in the next lesson. For now, I'm just showing you how the buttons are made and how they are labelled. Then we get down to the push buttons, and the first push button, this one here, is push button number 9. There are two options for programming the button. You can program it to do something when you press it and have a different function run when you release it. To start with, we're just doing something very simple. So this toggles the GPS. Next one is the OBS button, and working our way down. There is a special function reserved for button 17. A short click changes the layer and it decreases the layer one. A long click changes the zoom factor on the 530. So a short press on that button will take me up a layer, and already I'm in the root layer. So if I press the next one, if I press the top button once, it does that. Okay, so the long button is going to decrease the zoom if a long press, and the bottom button, long press, zooms out. Sorry, bottom button zooms in, top button zooms out. As you can see, I'm zooming in. So finally, at the very bottom of the file, we have the LEDs, and you can see here that I've added a couple of lines of text, and I'm going to show you what I've added. We'll do just one little bit of coding on this one, and it's a new feature inside 1.3 of the framework that allows you to easily make the LEDs follow the knob. If I turn the barrow lead button, for example, if I turn it to the right, you can see the LED follows me to the left and follows me to the right. And I've done it for button 2 and I've done it for button 3. So how did I do this? It is really simple. Take a close look at what you see on the screen here. In fact, can we zoom in so you can see what I've got? Your standard line with no LED function is labelled like this: 08 X-Touch micro LED value. That is button 8, button 7, button 6, button 5. As you can see, button 1, button 3 and button 4, or rotary 1, rotary 3, rotary 4, has these additional pieces of text in. So let's explain what it is. Get rid of the 0. The 0 is the LED light that's going to light. 0 for no LEDs. The documentation will show you the values that you can put in there. And there's a whole range of values that you can put in, whether you want a single LED light or you want a fan option. All of those are available, and all of these are going to be covered in the forthcoming lessons. But for now, I'm going to replace the 0 with, in this case it's button 2, so I'll put button 2 in, space, at X-Touch gauge underscore macro follow me LED. This is the advantage of using a text editor. For those that have never done anything like this before, it's prompted me already to put it in, so I can just press enter. Saves a lot of typing. Space. And if I was to save that and then disconnect Lorbeez and reconnect, that second rotary will now have a follow me. So I can now add for all of the buttons. Get rid of the leading 0 and replace it with the rotary that you're programming. So I'm programming rotary 5 space at X-Touch space, save it, and now all of my rotaries have a LED that follows you as you turn the gauge. That was just an indication of what's coming up next time when we start programming functions and we start programming the LEDs in more detail. So there's something for you to play with. One final word of warning on programming. If you're going to jump ahead and make a change to any of these keys, be aware that you must have a space and then the word end enclosed in brackets at the end of your line of code. And your code must be in one continuous line. So if you're going to start jumping ahead, if you're already coding and you've got an idea to put in quite complex bits of code in here, everything has to fit in one line, and you close the line with an end. If you do not do that, or you do not have a space, you're going to break things. So we had a look at the labels. That was pretty easy. I showed you where the code goes for the left and right on the rotaries. Do not forget you must have an end at the end of the line. We got the push buttons. Something about a long click there. We'll cover that in the next one, I promise you. And then we had a quick look at the lights. The rotary LEDs. We haven't done anything with these push button LEDs. Again, I promise you we'll start working on that. And we had a layer button. We had changed layers. We got multiple layers. So if I was to open up piece of text 2, which was the C1721, that is my second line. On this one, if I turn the rotaries, there is no follow me LED because I have not put that follow me LED code down the very bottom. So different lights on different layers. Okay, so far we've been talking about the desktop FIP, and people have commented that I don't need that. I don't fly in VR. Well, this one wasn't designed for VR anyway, but why do I need it? Let me show you how I use it in the real world. So I have, if I swap over, if I open up my other camera, so here you can see my throttle quadrant, my honeycomb. There is the X-Touch Mini, and I've got an iPad above that mounted on this 3D print, which is running Space Desk and has a second monitor for the simulator. So what I can do now, I can drag this gauge onto the iPad. Oh, don't you love it? And now I've got labeling, and I can see which button is doing what. So my barometer. So now I do not need overlays on the bay ringer, and that's going to become very useful when we move to the next lessons, when we talk about having maybe 4, 5, 6 or even 7 different layers. How am I going to print those out to go on there? Now I've got it all as a note on that iPad mini. So let me drag that back now to the main screen, close that. And one final thing I wanted to talk about before we say goodbye, this has been a long session, is a minor irritation with the web FIPs. The web FIPs are going to be used for VR flyers. If you're not interested at all in VR, you can ignore this, but it might be of use if you're using other web interfaces in the toolbar. Let me show you. So I will close the desktop FIP and I will start a web FIP the X-Touch medium. Can't see anything yet because this is now inside my toolbar in Microsoft Flight Simulator, and we can access the Access and O's fit panel, and there it is. Now there are a couple of annoyances. One, it never remembers where you put it, so I hope they're going to fix that in an upcoming update on Microsoft. And secondly, if I resize this panel, let's try and make it bigger, I lose the content. Don't worry, you just have to minimize it and open it again and it comes back. So when you're resizing this panel, you lose the content. Minimize, open again, and it's all there. If you want a smaller panel, this doesn't resize. I can't make this window smaller than that panel. If I want a different size panel, inside Gauges, in Access and O Web Fips, disable it. Let's close that. Go to Web Fips, and from the drop down list I choose the extra small one now, for example. Now I have a small version of the gauge, but the window is still the same size. I make the window smaller and the gauge has disappeared. So, and it's back. So that was it. Just thought I'd show you that one. So that's it. A long session, but we covered quite a lot, I think. We haven't done any real coding other than that LEDs. I just wanted to give you something to show you how easy it is going to be for you to program these lights to react to all sorts of things. So great for 2D, great for VR. Every time we get into this, I'm just having so much fun. Don't forget, if you've got any questions, got any problems, please feel free to leave a comment on YouTube, and don't forget the Discord channel is now live, and I've got to say a massive thank you to Fanatic. He's the guy behind the Access and O layers, and he's really, I mean, go onto Discord and see how much work he's been putting in there. This is over and above anything I've seen from people that get paid, let alone guys that are doing this. Thank you very much, Thomas. And to the rest of you, enjoy your flying. Look out for lesson 3. That's coming up. It should be live in the next 5-6 days. Got a lot to get through. Enjoy your flying, stay safe, and speak to you soon. Bye.